everyone, Stepan here. Today we are going to talk about middle game patterns and how to learn them. I'm going to try to give you resources, advice, not just mine, but from the top coaches and authors. And I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible to understand how to learn chess patterns on your own, especially middle game patterns, since those in the opening and those in simple endgames are usually much easier to grasp, and there have been many books written on them. To begin with, I'm going to show you a very real example from my own personal experience, and a pattern that many of you probably know of, but perhaps don't know enough about. So, to start off with, it's knight d5 in the Sicilian, which is a very broad thing. The knight d5 sacrifice in the Sicilian defense works in Scheveningen structures, but knight d5 is also important in hedgehogs, it's important in the Najdorf, the d5 pawn break is important in the Najdorf. So the knight coming to d5 is so famous that if you play the Sicilian or if you play e4, you must have heard of it and at least had an opportunity to play it in one of your games. So to begin this story, this is the game I played against Lovro Novosel. Lovro is a FIDE master now. I'm not sure if he crossed 2400 yet, but he's very strong. And this is our game from the Solitaire Open 2021, so about 4 years ago. And at this point, I had already been playing chess for about 5 years. I would play e4 in most of my games. At that point, maybe I played e4 exclusively. And this was a Najdorf in which I played the move h3, starting the Adams attack. In this position, I played the move knight d5, which wasn't my prep exactly. I didn't have prep for this position, but I was looking at knight d5 in similar positions while preparing for the game. And my opponent took the knight. It's clear that, you either take the knight or you move the queen. If you move the queen, I take your bishop. You cannot castle. And taking, after, I think he must have taken at least half an hour, he took the knight. Long story short, playing knight d5 was absolutely correct. It was one of the best moves. It wasn't the only thing white could do, but it's definitely justified. And the idea behind it is I want to go queen e2, and I want to put pressure on black's king. And my opponent played g6 in this position because there's another clear threat. The main reason I played knight d5 is because I knew Lovro would have to play g6. Because if I play knight f5 here, then you just lose the game. Because if I get my piece back and I've taken a central pawn, that's it. So Lovro plays g6, I played queen e2, and now there's basically one move, knight b6. And if you play knight e5, there is f4. He played knight b6, and at this point it wasn't really clear to me what to do. And the position is better for white, it's about plus 0.7. It's not a winning advantage, but I have more than enough compensation for the piece. And the way to go here is very, very tough. The engine plays a4, and that's one of the main ideas. And if the pawn is taken, if the pawn is taken with the knight, no one will take with the b pawn. Then you go bishop d2, and the idea is bishop a5. Whether the knight heads back to b6 or not, you play bishop a5, and the queen needs to undefend the bishop, or step onto d7, after which you can go h4 and bishop h3. So that's sort of the engine idea. Instead of that, in the game, I played the move f4, which was the losing move. The position is now -2 for black, and Lovro should have taken on d5. Instead, he played knight c8, which is another inaccurate move and gives white the advantage again. But basically, after playing f4, I was worse. From a human perspective, because f4 doesn't really do much, my idea was to play f5, f6. In the end, it paid off. I still lost the game, but I had a fine position. So this is my first true knight d5 sacrifice. And let's say I want to learn about this pattern. How would I go about doing that? And after this game, I really wanted to study sacrifices with knight d5. When I was preparing for the game, that was my idea. And I had decided, okay, I'm going to go knight d5. I'm going to go with the Adams attack. And I haven't really studied patterns with knight d5. So what can you do? There are a couple of things you can do. First, let's go through the easiest, the path of least resistance. Grab some books on middle games and see if there's something on the exact structure you're trying to learn something about. So knight d5 in this case was in the Scheveningen structure. So what I would do is I would open up chess structures by Flores Rios, and I've put a little paper here where the Scheveningen structure is, and I would read what GM Flores Rios says. So
back then, I had a few students, and my goal was kind of try to make the lessons as instructive as possible from kind of like a positional standpoint. For me, it's actually very important to make sure that students take something away from the lesson that is generalizable, right? Mm-hmm. So I always try to ask them, like when the lesson is over, like, what did you learn today? And sometimes they don't have a good response. Like maybe the response is like, oh, I should have moved the knight to g5. That's not a very useful conclusion. So I always tell them, like, you have to be able to put your understanding and your learning into words, or otherwise you didn't learn, right? So that's what I wanted to do, right? That was kind of one aspect. The other is I was always kind of building my own materials, and I realized a pattern that I was always trying to kind of explain how certain positions should have been played and what plans work and which ones don't. Because one problem that a lot of players have is that they know about open files, outposts, they know about positional sacrifices, and there's like a control of light squares, but they don't know which concept to apply on a given position. They don't know like what to focus on. There's too many elements. Yeah. So what I wanted to do is give context, be able to say, in these positions, worry about this, and in these positions, worry about that. And in these positions, don't waste your time pursuing this plan because it's never going to work.
It says, White's plans, launch a kingside attack with g2, g4, done. Play f2, f4, okay, done. I have read this chapter a while back before playing this game, so I remember that f4 was fine. And then play f2, f4, and then e4, e5. And then later carry out the kingside attack. Okay, black's plans, d5 pawn break, fine. Play along the c file. If white has castled long, carry out the queenside attack. So then there's stuff on structure transformations. If black plays d5 and white replies with e5, then obtain a French type 2. So this is the easiest way to see whether to see what's important for the structure you're trying to learn. Another book I use for that is Zlotnik. So there's a whole chapter, if you guys can see this, the d5 square in the Sicilian. And obviously, it doesn't get much easier than that. If you have a couple of good middle game books, again, I use these two because both cover the Carlsbad and both cover every type of Caro-Kann and Semislav structure. So I'm all set. You can do that. If you're trying to learn a pattern, and you know about that pattern, that's the easiest thing you can do. You can get a very strong player, handpick material for you. Usually the material comes with exercises you can solve, and that's pretty easy. Now, step 2, and the most important step, is do research on your own. This is much harder, and it requires a lot more time. I'll give you another example. So the next game I want to show you I found it because of my own research. So this is the game Vallejo versus Nepomniachtchi, played in Spain in 2008. I hope you can notice the similarity in the structure. It's Scheveningen, where black has played b4. So, the only question is, does knight d5 work? And in the game, white did play knight d5. This could be taken. It doesn't have to be taken, but Nepomniachtchi took the knight and played bishop c8. And after this, rook e1, bishop e7 was played. And I hope you can see the similarity. So this is the Nepomniachtchi game, and this is my game against Lovra, where there's pressure on the bishop on e7, and black needs to struggle to defend that bishop. c4 played. Now, if this is taken en passant, then white just gets a lot more liberty for their pieces, and the ultimate idea is to eventually play c5 and d6, grab that bishop. King f8 unpinning, a3, b8, 3, rook a3, the rook is coming in. Bishop g5 was the losing blunder by Nepomniachtchi, and after this, the game is just over. So bishop g5, queen g5, knight e6 check. If you don't take it, you lose the queen. If you take it, you just lose. So d6. Now the idea is rook f3, knight f6, h4, queen g6, followed by queen d5, and in about 5 moves, Nepomniachtchi resigned. So this is a good example of knight d5 that worked. How did I find that game? Well, I did it the hard way. I went through all games in the Adams attack first. So I would go to chessgames.com. I would find the ECO code. My criteria would be white wins. Okay, I did that first. And I was looking for games in which knight d5 works. After that, I went through the Scheveningen, and I went through many hedgehogs to see whether there are similar games to that. So I found, for example, this position. This is the position from the game Jobava, Hernandez Carmenates, 2008, played in Barcelona. And in this position, Jobava played knight d5. ED, bishop e7, rook e1. Sounds familiar? Yes. Okay, knight b8, exactly the same as my game against Novosel, this pattern of defending the knight laterally with the queen by moving the knight, except Lovra put the knight on b6. And in the game, okay, this is a way more extreme example because black really has nothing. There's no bishop on b7 yet, and white is just crushing it. So how did I find these games? I looked for them on chessgames.com. There are smarter ways to do that. Maybe now with, all the tools we have at our disposal, there's a very simple way to, take a picture of a position. I don't know of it. I know that there's a tool you can get within ChessBase to find you similar positions, but I'm very averse to paying a lot of money to ChessBase because I hate that piece of software. I think it's outdated. And I'm, hoping there's a completely free alternative soon. And I use Lichess and chessgames.com as an alternative. It takes me a bit more time, but I get to go through a lot more games. And I don't have an easy way to find patterns, but that's still what I do. And I will show you another game. So I was preparing for a game that I played last week. And I was preparing for an opponent named Josip Tonkovic, who plays for a club in our league. And he has black in this position. He has had black in this position against Matija Zadravec, a Croatian FIDE master. And in this position, Matija played a4. Notice it's a Scheveningen, same structure. The best move here, which I had found in my prep, is knight d5. The reason I found it is because I was looking for it. And I have my database of patterns. So I have a Lichess study titled Knight d5 in the Sicilian. And as soon as I saw that Josip plays a6 against the closed Sicilian, I started looking for opportunities to get Knight d5 in. And actually, this is the only game he has in the closed Sicilian online. And Matija played a4 here, still won the game, but he won because he's a much stronger player. In fact, Knight d5 is crushing here. If ed5, white has, if you turn on the engine, a +3 advantage. Bishop e7 loses straight away. So there's no debate there because of knight f5. g6 hasn't been played. Remember my game against Lovra, where he played the move g6 to prevent knight f5. In this position, Zadravec, Tonkovic, knight f5 would have won straight away. So on ed, the king has to move, king d8. And now the simple plan, bishop d2. You want to do this, and bishop, and bishop a5 and win. This is a long-term type of advantage. So what I'm trying to say here is the way to learn a very specific pattern is to try to use easy resources if you have access to them, but you don't need them. They aren't completely necessary. You can do without Zlotnik and Flores Rios, but having these books makes it easier. I have linked to my reviews of the books below, so you can find that over there. I think they are great and they make my study much easier. If you're like me and you think practicing against the engine is boring because it either crushes you or plays like an idiot, try playing against Noctie. Noctie is a human-like AI that's going to adapt to your strength, is going to play like a human, try to trick you like a human, and challenge you on your own level. The first thing you can do is, of course, assess your rating, and you can play a rating test against Noctie. Yeah, the only move is g4 and then queen f4 mate. Yeah. Good. Yes! 25-57! Come on! It's going to tell you your strength, but there are many, many more features. The first thing is, when you play Noctie, you get instant feedback, and all of your moves will get sort of color-coded. Noctie will immediately tell you if you made a mistake. That way you can ask Noctie to see where you went wrong. You can play games in openings you're trying to learn, so you can import any repertoire you want and play Noctie in that specific opening. Just go to... One of my favorite features, if not my favorite one, and the one I use the most, is themes. So you can play Noctie in any specific position you choose. So if you go to your themes, you can see that I've made quite a few. So let's say you want to play out this position. This is a position from Spassky's game where he triangulated perfectly. If you're trying to practice something, you can create a new theme. Just add an FEN or a PGN and play it out against Noctie. That way, if you have an endgame you would like to practice, you don't have to find an actual human to play against, nor will you have to play against a 2800 engine or against a 500 engine human. If you would like to check Noctie out, you can follow the link in the description, and if you would like to get a 64% discount, use the code HANGINGPawns. Okay. Now for part 2. How do we know which patterns to study? So there are many opinions on this, and I like what De La Villa says in his book, maybe new book, I'm not sure, 100 Endgame Patterns You Must Know. I hope you guys can read this. So he says, some theories talk of 50 or 100,000 patterns accumulated through 5,000 or 10,000 hours of study. The exact number is not important. It's even possible, I would say probable, that different people store them in different ways. What matters to us is the method of discovering and using patterns and ascertaining which ones are really common at the stage which we are studying. It's easy to think that patterns merely guide us towards the idea to be followed, even more so when we tend to read, often with reference to endgame positions. Now it's all a matter of calculation, and theoretical knowledge is of no use. As a matter of fact, I believe that this is not the case, and that stored patterns are just as important in calculating variations as in establishing little plans, because they guide our selection of candidate moves at each moment. So it's a question of improving intuition by analyzing positions, not in a random way though, but focusing on representative positions in which over and over again we can find interesting ideas which occur in different variations and subsequently in different positions, and so on and so on. So if you want to listen to De La Villa, which I think we should, there are a lot of patterns you must learn in order to become proficient in chess. And if you had to list 100,000 patterns, Kasparov couldn't do that, Carlsen couldn't do that, no one could do that. Because firstly, they don't have a name. Secondly, we aren't machines. And our brain teaches itself and learns in a very abstract way. In short, if you looked at 100 chess games every day, you would build a library of patterns very quickly. And the long answer to this could be probably the best way to learn middle game patterns is to analyze games on your own and to play games. So I recently talked to Jacob Aagaard on many things. And among others, we talked about pattern recognition, calculation, and his famous questions. And he told me, when we were talking about calculation and building a library of patterns, that players need to do two things simultaneously when trying to improve their calculation and thinking. One thing is very simple positions, which serve for building up patterns. And you should solve them quickly without setting them up over the board. And the second part is complex positions which you need to deeply concentrate in order to solve. So What he suggests is some sort of library of simple patterns. And one may use the Woodpecker method, for example. And I'm not a big fan, or I shouldn't say I'm not a big fan. I haven't seen results. Maybe my brain works differently. Maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe I should do it again. I don't know. But this spaced repetition just feels insane to me. That being said, maybe I'm sure I have increased my patterns library at least a bit. But in short, as you can see here, you have to solve it by going over very simple positions many times until you can do them almost intuitively. And I've been through the part 2, the positional, whatever it's called, positional tactics, and the tactics which are in part 1. And I have to say I enjoyed book 2 much more. But the idea behind both books is the same. They give you 1,000 positions. You solve them once. Actually, I can show you the exact instructions. Okay, so cycle 1, solve a set of exercises over approximately 4 weeks. Take the next day off. Do the same set in 2 weeks. Repeat. And you are done once you are able to solve 1,000 positions in a day. That means that you understand them so well that you can do them instantly. So that's one sort of approach. I'm not sure if I agree with that completely. There is a book called The Modern Guide to Checkmating Patterns by Barsky, and he basically copied Viktor Kenkin's method of teaching tactical patterns in his famous book, The Last Check. And I like the preface in the book where Tal says, when I examine a concrete position, I notice, first of all, its particular characteristics, the mutual piece placements, and their connections. And suddenly, in the majority of cases, this happens intuitively, the outlines of some new position will flash up, tantalizing and attractive. It's not yet on the board, of course, but all the signs are there that it could arise. Then the chase for the bird begins. Often calculating the variations is a Sisyphean task. The position in the mind's eye is almost impossible to reach, even if the opponent enters into cooperation with you. Some piece is on the wrong square, some pawn gets in the way, but sometimes a tedious search of variations brings real results. Move by move, one approaches the desired final position, which one saw from afar, and if the circle of variations is closed, then you can start the combination. So basically what Tal is saying, and he's a guy famous for playing knight d5 in 20 of his games, among other sacrifices, he says that he sees a position, and what often happens is he will imagine a position he would like to accomplish in the future without actually having calculated the variations. So he will get an image of, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and then he would try to find ways to achieve that. And I chose this because this is an example of a player who has a massive library of patterns in his brain, middle game patterns, tactical and positional. And this might happen for other strong players, I don't know. I haven't spoken to many, but I think this is the ideal. And I think we should aim to do so much work on our own to make sure that the patterns stick. And once again, I want to recommend a great method for doing that, called Solitaire Chess. Not invented by me. I think it might have been invented by Alex Fishbein. But basically, you take a position, you take a game, and you play it out pretending that you're one side by covering all the moves. So you go to move 1, or you can skip theory if you want, but basically try to guess the move for the side you're playing for. Once you decide, you uncover your move, you uncover your opponent's next move, and you see whether you got it right. I usually do that with Karpov games, and if Karpov played a different move to my move, then I will figure out why. Was his move on my candidates list, but I had chosen something different because, whatever reason. Was his move not on my candidates list at all? Then, I'm starting to get worried. I want to figure out why. But as you do that, you build the library of patterns, especially valuable are the moves which the player you're trying to emulate played and you hadn't considered at all. And I could name a million different patterns, but a few simple patterns are, let's say, and I hope you can visualize this, if one side has knights on either b6, g6, b3, or g3, in many, many, many master games, people will try to punish that with h4, h5, a4, or a5. If there's a knight on b6, a4 should be one of your immediate candidate moves because a5 chases the knight away. Okay? Another very simple pattern, if your opponent has a fianchetto structure around their king, so g6 with the bishop on g7, and they have castled, and you have either castled queenside or haven't castled at all, meaning you still have a rook on h1, then h4, h5. That has to come as the most natural move if you've seen a bunch of games. So as you go through games, as you do solitaire chess, things are going to start to come naturally. And then there is part two of learning these patterns, which is applying them during games, or not applying them during games, but being able to draw pieces of information from your library of patterns at an opportune moment. And in order to do that, there are many techniques, but I really like Jacob Aagaard's way of doing that.
We're very good at finding answers, but finding out what the real question is often the problem.
Yeah.
And I made a list of what are the relevant questions. There are other interesting questions, like which side of the board should I play on? Should I play for dynamics or should I play for tactics? Sulberg Hansen gave me a fantastic question. How could I ever lose this position? If you have a good position, how could I ever lose this position? It's a great question.
Yeah.
If you're sort of sitting generous saying, like, how could things go wrong? Okay, they could go wrong there, there, and there. Okay, I'm aware of it now. Hopefully that will not happen. And other things. But anyway, I ended with 3 questions, which is where are the weaknesses, which is the worst placed piece, and what's the opponent's idea. And the order of them don't really matter. So 2 of them is for both sides. So where are the weaknesses in the opponent's positions, where are the weaknesses in my position, what's the worst placed piece for the opponent, what's the worst placed piece for mine, and the opponent's idea doesn't really work the other way around. Yeah. That's my idea. That's where we hope to end up. And the idea of these 3 questions is that we all, again, have a lot of chess in us, a lot of knowledge, but somehow we have a tendency to tunnel vision in a random place decided by our intuition, where if we just sort of opens the goddess a bit more and like, let's look at pieces, let's look at the structure, let's look at the opponent, which is everything. Pieces, pawns, opponent, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole game. Summarized into 3 questions. If you just focus your attention on these things a little bit in an active way, it's very easy to answer the questions most of the time. Sometimes no good answer comes of it and you just move on. And I have found many times with, let's say, Shanklin, let's say up to Satorov, like the decent players that I have coached, that I just say, okay, just go through the 3 questions. Oh yeah, I just have to play this. I'm such a
way of doing that, and yeah, this is what he proposes. So to sum things up, learning middle game patterns can be done multiple different ways, but I think there's no debate that analyzing games and playing games is the most important part of that process, and there's no going around that. You're going to have to do that. There have been many strong players in the history of chess who hadn't had access to the internet, who hadn't had access to ChessBase or Chessable or Lichess or YouTube videos, and they all became very strong. They did that by analyzing games and reading books. And I still think that's the most efficient way to do that. Yeah, so these are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, post them below. I hope you got something from the video. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.